Hello and welcome to another episode of Meanbrews. On today's episode, I'm covering data for Czech Premium Pale Lager or Bohemian Pilsner. Let's get right into the data. I have 25 Czech Pale Lagers that have won awards. 2 were Best of Show, 12 golds, 8 silver, and 3 bronze. The BJCP style is 03B, rich, characterful, pale Czech lager with considerable malt and hop character and a long rounded finish. Complex yet well balanced and refreshing. When I look at the evolution and the variation, very, very minimal. I think there's 2 variables that are evolving with time, and I'll present those in later slides. Original gravity, the range, BJCP range, is from 1.044 to 1.060. Pretty much stayed within this. Some beers were bigger. The average was 1.054. As with the previous video, I'm going to start showing where my recommended video is going to be on the curves. So I'm going to shoot for right at that mean of 1.054. One of the 2 variables that's evolving is the original gravity is going down with time. We're seeing a trend down with a Pearson's correlation coefficient of negative 0.36. Not the strongest correlation, but we are seeing a trend down somewhere just a point below 1.054. IBUs range between 26 and 51 with an average of 41. I'm going to shoot for 41 as well. Color, average was 4.06. Not a lot of color to this style. Brewfather says I'm going to be at 3.1, but I am going to decoct it. So I think that it struggles trying to predict what the color will be when you're going to do a decoction. Base malt 94.1%, crystal malt 4.7, toast 0.9, and adjunct 0.3. Those were the averages for all the recipes in my data set. When you look at the distribution, base malts range between about 82 and 100% of the grist. And then when we zoom in on the specialty malts, I'm shooting for right under the average here. And for the specialty malts, you've got crystal, which was used in about 65% of the recipes, and its average was right about between 6 and 7% crystal malts, and then toast was under 20%, and adjunct was under 10%. So not prominent. I am going to use a crystal at right under the mean, around 6.3%, I believe. The only other variable that we're seeing change over time is the use of crystal, and this is reducing with a Pearson's correlation coefficient of negative 0.46. So it's decreasing with time, closer and closer to just purely base malts with decoction. For the base malts, most prominent was Pilsner malt. 100% of the recipes used a Pilsner malt at an average of 91% of the grist, as low as 70. Some others that were used but not prominent: wheat, Vienna, Munich, and rye, all under 20% each, so I will not be using in my recipe. And I'm using 93% of my grist as Pilsner malt. Crystal malts, Carapils, over 50% of the recipes use a Carapils at an average of 5.9% of the grist. Others that were used were a light crystal, which is the blue curve here. A little under 30% of recipes use a light crystal, and I think just 1 recipe or 2 used a medium crystal. I am going to use a Carapils just above the average of about 7%. Probably guess my recipe now. Toasted malts, nothing real prominent here. I think 1 recipe for Melanoidin and a home toasted Pilsner. A couple recipes for aromatic. Not going to recommend use a toasted malt for this style. Adjuncts, 2 recipes used 1 adjunct each. 1 used flaked oats and 1 used dextrose. It's funny, the one that used flaked oats, the guy commented that the head brewer judged his beer and said it was the most authentic. So I'm not sure that they actually used flaked oats in Pilsen, but that was really interesting. Bittering hops, Satz takes the cake here. 72% of the recipes use Satz, and then a bunch of other more traditional continental European hops, except for the Wakatu, which was interesting that it won a medal with Wakatu. I'm going to use Satz for my recipe. Flavor hops, again, Satz, 80% of the recipes use Satz, and Sterling Tradition and EKG were other flavor hops used. I plan on using Sots. Aroma hops, again, 80% of the recipes use Sots, Sterling, EKG, Wakatu, and Tradition. Or other aroma hops, I'm going to stick with the Sots. A few recipes use dry hop, and they were all Sots. I am not going to use a dry hop, so it wasn't prolific enough to warrant using in my recipe. Rate of hop additions, 92% of the recipes use the flavor hop addition at an average of 0.21 ounce per gallon or 1.57 grams per liter. Also, 92% of the recipes use an aroma hop at 0.25 ounce per gallon or 1.87 grams per liter. And only 8% of the recipes use a dry hop at 0.18 ounce per gallon or 1.35 grams per liter. I'm not using dry hops, and I'm going to pick basically 0.2 and 0.22 for my flavor and aroma hop addition, respectively. A little bit different. I saw a lot of people putting in different timings of Sots outside of what I typically do. So I wanted to show where the proportion of recipes, these are percentage of recipes, and these are minutes in the boil. So this is from 90 in 5-minute increments, 90 down to 0 minutes left in the boil. And you can see some spikes here. The people either did a 90 or 60-minute boil, and so these are the two, bittering hop additions. But there's a big one here between 30 and 35 minutes. That 60% of the recipes added an addition. And these two right here kind of were the flavor hop addition and either the flame out or 5-minute addition here at the end. Then I overlaid on top of that what were the rates that they hopped at each one of these additions. And you can kind of see the big charge is at the 30-minute or at the 90-minute bittering level. I also looked at what was the average number of additions people put in, and it was somewhere around 4. So people were putting in a bittering charge, a 30-minute, somewhere around 10 to 20 minutes, right in this range here, and then a flavor hop addition. Those were the most prominent, and that's what I'm sticking with my recipe. I'll put in a bittering charge, the 30-minute, and then these two, and I will use these rates that came from the data. Pretty interesting chart. Mash type, majority of mashes were decoction or step mashes, a couple single infusion mashes. I will be using a decoction mash for my recommended recipe. As far as the rest, there were 4 separate rests that people hit. First one was 21% did an acid rest at an average of 101 Fahrenheit or 38 Celsius for an average of about 20 minutes. 67% of the recipes did a protein rest at an average of 125 Fahrenheit or 52 Celsius for an average of 21 minutes. 46% of the recipes did a beta. Average temperature was 145 Fahrenheit or 63 Celsius for an average of about 30 minutes. And then for the alpha rest, the average temperature was 155 or 68 Celsius for an average of 45 minutes. If they did the beta and the alpha rest, then this drops down to 30 minutes. So you'll see that reflected in my recipe. I'm not going to do an acid rest, but I'm going to use the averages for each one of these rests. I think they're prominent. I will drop down the duration here to 30 minutes like I just talked about. A different chart here, number of decoctions. There were all over the place from none to 4, 5 decoctions. I'm going to use 3. The average was right under 2. But I plan to use 3 for mine. It's funny, I looked at each one, and the people that did decoct, I was expecting to do thick decoction at the beginning, thinner decoction at the end. Most of the recipes that won did thick decoctions every time. So I think there were 2 recipes, Annie Johnson's being one of them, that did a thick, thin decoction. But I'm going to plan to use thick for the 3 decoctions that will be in this recipe at the end. All right, so I also wanted to look at how long do people hold the decoction when they were going from protein to saccharification. How long did they hold it at saccharification temperature? So they pulled out their decoction and then they held it at 150. How long was the average? And that's right around 10 minutes up to 20 minutes. Some didn't, just straight up to start boiling it, right? So I'm going to shoot for around 10 minutes, which is right at the average here. All right, how long do people decoct these things? As I said, there are multiple decoctions at different places. So starting with, the most prominent was from the saccharification rest to the mash out. And about 90% of the decocted recipes did this step as a decoction, and they boiled for an average of about 12 minutes. The next most prominent was from the protein rest to the saccharification rest, whether it be beta or straight to alpha. About 65% of the recipes did this decoction step of the ones that were decocted at an average of about 15 minutes. Next most prominent is from beta to alpha, so the two saccharification steps. 40% of the recipes, basically all the ones that did the beta that were decocted, did this step at an average of about 15 minutes again. Then we had a couple more, one that was for 15 minutes from the acid rest to the protein rest, and one that was 45 minutes after they mashed out. They pulled a portion of the mash and just boiled it before they ran it off. So I thought that was interesting. They said that it came out a lot darker than they expected, but they still want to meddle with it. I plan to do the protein to saccharification rest at 15 minutes, and the beta to alpha rest at 15 minutes, and then do a 10-minute boil to go to mash out from saccharification. So I'll do 15, 15, 10, all thick decoctions. Boil duration, the average was 84 minutes, and I'm going to do a 90-minute boil just because I think it contributes to the color of this style. The yeast used, the most prominent was White Labs 800, which is a Pilsner Urquell strain. 32% of the recipes use that. That's also Y Yeast 2001. Y Yeast 2278, this is also claimed to be a Pilsner Urquell strain. I think they have multiple lager strains. 50% of the recipes use Pilsner Urquell strain. Very interesting. 830 was the next most prominent, which is 3470. I'm not even going to... This is the Budweiser, the original Budweiser strain, I believe. 16% of the recipes use that. Oktoberfest strain, the Weihenstephan 206. And then Imperial L11. If you know which strain this is, let me know. I couldn't find it. One recipe used Imperial L11. I will be using White Labs 800. Ironically, I've just started using this yeast on a German Pilsner. Absolutely love it. There's claims out there that it's an ale strain. It's a Sac C strain, and that it's cold conditioned to ferment at lower temperatures. I find it's finicky at anything below 53, even though it's touted to be up or to ferment at around 45 or 48 to 52. But it's clean, very, very clean yeast. Very impressed with this. Use it on 2 lagers now. I'm very happy with the results. Water chemistry, of course, Pilsen water is very soft. We did have some big ranges here, but most of the averages are very, very soft water. 23 parts per million calcium, 5 parts per million magnesium, 7 sodium, 16 sulfate, and 14 chloride. You can almost just use straight RO water here and be fine. Oh, my recipe is going to be pretty much on the averages for the sulfate, chloride, and sodium, and a little bit lower. It'll get enough calcium from the mash that I don't have to worry about having too few calcium, and very low on the magnesium. Fermentation temps, all the strains, the average was right around 51. For the White Labs 800, the first Pilsner Urquell strain, people fermented again a little bit warmer than that, I believe. It might be on the average, but between 50 and 51 right in here. Y Yeast 2278, a little bit cooler at 50. And then 830, they were at 48, 49. So it's kind of affirmation that this is really an ale strain, which I found ironic. I'm going to use White Labs 800 right at 50 if I can make it work. I will bump that up as I go. Other variables, average carbonation volumes was 2.45 volumes of CO2, and the average mash pH was 5.25. All right, on to my recipe. I'm going to start with 2 grains, about 94% floor malted Bohemian Pilsner malt from Weirmann, and about 6.3% Care foam. So Care Pils and Bohemian floor malted Pilsner. I'm going to have those 4 hop additions we talked about. I'm going to have the 60-minute boil addition. to give me about 7.9 IBUs. And then I'm going to put in 0.3 ounce per gallon or 2.25 grams per liter of SOTS at 30 minutes. And I'm going to put 0.2 ounce per gallon or 1.5 grams per liter of SOTS at 15 minutes. And then back up to 0.23 ounce per gallon or 1.72 grams per liter at flame out. That'll give me about 41 IBUs. And I'm going to use the White Labs WLP 800, which is the Pilsner Lager strain. I plan to shoot for an original gravity of 1.054 and 41 IBUs. My water chemistry, which I showed before, 10 parts calcium, 2 parts magnesium, 8 parts per million sodium, 14 chloride, and 16 sulfate, and very low bicarbonates. Going to start with reverse osmosis water and build from there. My mash pH, I'm shooting for 5.25, and I'm going to do some decoction steps at 125, 145, and 155 for 25 minutes, 30, and 30. Detailed instructions in the brew frother recipe on when to do these, how long to boil, and all that for the decoctions. Can't put it in here, it's just too much information. I'm going to mash out, sparge, and boil for 90 minutes as per the data. Chill to 50, oxygenate and pitch at 0.4 liters per gallon starter. That's a 2 liter starter. That's a minimum. If you can go bigger, if you can go 4 liter starter for this, I think that will produce the cleanest beer possible. So this is the bare minimum I would recommend. Ferment at 50 and allow to free rise to 62 as the fermentation tails off. So if you get about 5 points to your terminal gravity, start bumping the temperature up to around 62 and hold there for 2 to 3 days for a diacetyl rest. Chill slowly to 32 and lager for a month. I didn't present that, but the average lager duration was about a month for this beer style. Transfer to keg, bottle, and condition to 2.5 volumes of CO2. That's it. And thank you for watching this one. And next one, I'm going to go back to Reddit, and I'm going to post a poll and see who gets the most upvotes. So look out for my post on Reddit, and we'll pick the next style. Until then, see you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.